Well, your internal combustion engine needs air too. It pulls it through this air box here, through the intake pipe, and into the intake manifold, and then on down somewhere through there into the sparky boom area. Now, engineers spend hours and hours and hours of time creating the perfect balance of filtration, airflow, and sound control. Then there's like me that come along and throw that all away because we think we know better. When I purchased the Sport Trac, it already had a cold air intake kind of set up on it already. Something like that. And it works basically the same as the factory air routing. I had plans of doing a dual battery setup in the engine bay, but there's not much free space. The decision was made to put the battery where the airbox currently is. This meant rerouting the intake pipe and filter. Easy. A quick jaunt to the local hardware store for some PVC connectors and BAM! New intake pipe. Now there was plenty of space for our second battery. Just had to find a battery to fit. A few months passed, and it was time to finish what I started. Wait a minute. Yep, I decided to put an air compressor in the opening I intended to put a second battery. That compressor barely fit, but fitting is fitting. I've been running this setup for almost 2 years now, and as I get further into planning what I want to do with the Sport Trac, I'm realizing this air filter location sucks for two main reasons. The first is all the hot air it pulls in from the radiator. It is very noticeable when towing a trailer, with intake temperatures almost reaching normal coolant temperatures. That's bad. Secondly, there's no good way to connect piping for a snorkel setup. Any attempt would be clunky. What we need to do is get the intake back over by the fender. This will give the engine colder air to intake and gives better access for snorkel stuff in the future. I think the best bet is over by the air compressor, where the original location of the filter housing was. There's roughly a 3-inch gap between the air compressor and the factory coolant overflow tank. After a couple attempts, I realized this gap was too small to work with. Try number 2, failure. But I will not be deterred. This coolant overflow tank is not pressurized, so it could be placed anywhere. Or replaced by, say, a Arnold Palmer bottle. A couple cuts to separate the coolant tank from the washer fluid tank and a couple bolts, and we have a nice open fender to work with. What's even better, I can simply flip the bend for my first routing 180 degrees and give us almost exactly the setup we need. Yes, I do see the irony in the effort put into doing my own piping, just to end up pretty much back where I started. My defense will be the compressor is too tall to fit where the old coolant tank was. Obviously, this is still a work in progress. I'll most likely have to build my own snorkel setup since no one makes a kit for the Sport Trac. I'll also want to block off the back side of the filter from the engine bay to force the cold air to be pulled in from the fender. And whenever that happens, there will be a video on it. It just might be a while. Year, maybe 2, 3 tops. Now, engineers spend hours and hours and hours of hard time and effort designing the perfect intake system to make the perfect balances of flow, sound, and air control. I messed that up.